Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming to this, coming to the March meeting, the end of our kind of financial year kind of meeting for the WAM sort of commissioning with governing body. Welcome to members of the public who are here. We have quite a full agenda today, actually. So we've got quite a full agenda which takes us over the 3 hours. So we're going to try to make sure that we get through the whole agenda. We also have a part 2 to the meeting, which is going to follow on from the meeting here. We haven't set aside any time for a tea break for ourselves again, but obviously there's tea, coffee and refreshments and toilet facilities. If people need to use them, please go out and use them. I wanted to also say that at about 4 o'clock we are due to have a photographer who's coming to take some photographs of governing body members and members of the public if they wish. If they don't wish to, that's absolutely fine. This is part of our preparation for our annual report. We've been starting to think about as a CCG, our first year as being a CCG, our successes, looking at the kind of things that we've done, and obviously having our governing body meeting is part of our annual yearly process, so we want to be able to include some photographs of that, and that's why I'm on that 4 o'clock. It should be relatively informal and unobtrusive photography, I think. If not, we'll blame me. So that's the format really for today. We're still waiting Sarah. Okay, so we've got one person who's going to be coming, she's coming from Oxford, so we may need to defer her item on the agenda. We have had one apology from our nurse representative, Jackie Gum, who couldn't be here today. But otherwise, we're a full governing body team. Have we got any conflicts of interest in relation to today's agenda that people wish to share?
I think there I'm the General Manager for People to Places, the Community Transport Organisation for the RDWM area, and that would be in relation to 2-year plan and 5-year plan.
Thank you. I obviously just wanted to declare my allegiance as a GP member, and also we have patients, and we're going to be looking just at approval of certain policies, and obviously we have patients who sometimes might meet some of those policies. So just to be for the GP members here, we may have So if there aren't any other conflicts that we want to declare, we're going to get on to discuss the minutes for the last meeting and the matters arising. Can we first of all just do a page turn and look for accuracy minutes, so people would have had these minutes and been able to look through them beforehand, but we'll look for accuracy on page 1 and 2.
One on page 2, if you remember, 6.1. It's a small but I think quite important point. It's about in the middle where it says the options were described, that sentence.
Yes.
The options were described as either a single tender waiver, procurement, or any other provider, any other
qualified provider. You got that? Thank you. That's page 1 and 2. Linking on then to page 3 and 4. Okay, people happy with page 3 and 4, and then page 5 and 6. So we can accept the minutes as a true accurate record of our last meeting. Thank you. Wanted to move on then to the action points on the minutes. So we have the first action point, which was just around the amendments of the minutes from the December meeting. I know you've done that and it's been published on the website. Good. That was So the next item is 2.4. It was around the joint management team and the CCG roles. We've got a part 2 item which is going to clarify some of those issues at that stage. Is there anything more you wanted to take?
No, I mean just in terms of feedback from the chairs in the wedding that I went on in terms of that, we unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to get input from members in advance of that, but as part of the ongoing discussions about suggestions coming out of that, we'll bring it back to the members and governing body for discussion.
Innovation Fund. The kind of information from the minutes of last week from the Innovation Fund is and then Rachel, I think this was the 4.3.2 was around showing us query around the 5-year plan, and we have got an agenda item for the 5-year plan, which is going to discuss those points. Okay. Is there anything outside of those points?
No, I mean, I'm hoping that we'll address, that's right, yes.
And then, that's it. That's our kind of, so, I just wanted to also, just before we move on to the next agenda item, just say that I think with the last governing body, the kind of timing of papers and the getting out of papers on time was not as good as it could have been, and hopefully that's been addressed for this governing body meeting. We've made a real effort, I think the team's made a real effort to be able to kind of plan the meeting much better to get the papers out, so people should have had plenty of opportunity to read the papers on the agenda items over the last couple of weeks. So hopefully that's helped in our understanding of the issues. Thank you. So we're going to wait, we're going to postpone the quality part of the meeting until Sarah comes. She's going to have some up-to-date information on Heather Wexford from the Henley Suite, which she's going to share with us on the quality scorecard. And we're going to move straight on then to the 2-year plan, to the 2-year operational plan, which Vicky is going to kick off with some input from Nigel.
Thank you, Adrian. So, as you say, I'll kick off and give you an introduction to this, and then Nigel's going to give you an overview of the finance section, and Rachel then's going to go on to some of the curriculum, quality, innovation, productivity and prevention section of the plan. So what you have in front of you as part of the papers is the 2-year operating plan that we submitted to the area team as a draft on the 14th of February. We have to submit our final version on the 4th of April. And we have just had, literally within the last day or so, some feedback from the area team on our draft plan. So there will be some amendments that we're going to make to what we have in front of you today. The operational plan really is what links our strategy that we've been working on over the last 18 months or so to the delivery of what we're going to do over the next 2 years. I'm sure Nigel will mention that this is the first time we've had a 2-year allocation, so our plan links to that 2-year allocation. As I say, much of what's in here, particularly in the sort of first half section, really is some context setting. It's about our strategic objectives, which we reviewed in the middle of last year, about our commissioning approach, the joint strategic needs assessment, and the needs of our local population. And this version really sets out the things that are slightly different, which are the financial picture, the major schemes and programmes that we're going to put in place during 2014-2015 to address what we need to deliver for our local population, and our quality strategy and the areas that we need to cover and to improve on against our performance around the NHS constitution. So what we're going to ask you to do today as a governing body is to approve in principle the submission for the 4th of April, subject to some amendments that we're certainly going to make around the feedback we've had from the area team, a lot of which is around some of the financial sections. And we've also had some more public engagement events as well, which we can reflect in this next iteration of the plan. That's what we're asking you to do today. So if I hand over to Nigel to take us through the finance section.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of the overall financial position for the CCG looking into 14-15. We've got around about £150 million to spend on commissioning services for patients. And the dozen or so pages within the plan around finance describe some of the general background to the setting of the budget plan for 14-15. Some of the key things that we need to make sure that we meet or deliver during the year in terms of the numbers. So, for example, delivering a 1% surplus on our budget next year, which is a national planning requirement. Also making sure that within all of our plans we set aside an appropriate amount of money for contingencies, for in case things occur during the year that we haven't foreseen and planned. And importantly, it sets at this stage a planning envelope for how much we're going to spend on key areas of the budget and key contracts. The papers which we have here, as Vicky has already said, relate to the submission that we had to the area team in the middle of February, and therefore are based on the financial numbers that I was working on about a week or so before that. That's still only partway through the planning and contract negotiation process, and so it is quite normal for, at this stage, for some of the numbers to change as we get closer to negotiating and finalising contracts with the clients. So some of these numbers will move around over the next few weeks, and by the time that we start next financial year, the first set of papers, financial papers that we will see for 14-15, we will have some finalised budgets. My key task at this time is to make sure that we are careful in juggling all of those different pressures and priorities and aware of all the issues coming through the negotiations, and we've appropriately budgeted for them. And there are a couple of tables towards the back of the finance part of this plan, which describe broadly where the £150 million will be going across the CCG's budgets. If there was one figure that's, well, perhaps there are two figures I want to highlight to the governing body. First is in relation to our overall funding allocation. We've had a 3.8% increase on a like-for-like basis compared to the current year, which is good and is one of the highest percentage increases of any CCG in the country. So that's a positive position to be in. It reflects a new funding formula which has been put in place for CCGs for 14-15, which is giving this CCG a little bit more money, and will continue to give the CCG a little bit more money than an average over the next 3 or 4 years, I think. The flip side of that is that we are, in the jargon, we have a distance from target. The theoretical allocation that we could have, and there's about a 10% difference between the actual money that we have and what that theoretical allocation might be. Over a period of time, we should expect that difference to reduce, but it takes quite a number of years for the formula to work through. So that's the first thing to highlight. The second is how much we are anticipating in terms of investments and savings through the equipment programme for 14-15. So in total, we are anticipating about £1.4 million worth of investments, and coming out of that, £4 million of savings. In setting the budget for next year, I will hold some money back in case some of those schemes do not fully deliver. But in terms of what we need to be focused on as a governing body and be seeking assurance through the new staff performance committees is, are we really focusing on those numbers? Are we focusing on the plans to deliver that degree of change and the benefits which come out of those changes, both in terms of finance, but also in terms of the patient benefits coming out of those changes to services and service redesigns which you've been doing there. So those are a couple of key numbers which I would encourage the governing body to focus on and to think about. There is a lot more detail within the report, much more than I can cover in 5 minutes or so in this meeting, but of course very happy to have conversations outside of this meeting with individual
Okay, so just to pick up on what we call the QUIP areas. So QUIP stands for Quality, Innovation, Productivity and Prevention. So the strategy we put forward with QUIP this year is very much about responding to where we are now and where we want to be in the future, and also taking into account what the local public have said, what they've said about having to only tell their story once, making sure that they have their care personalised much more, and make sure that we target intervention much earlier in the process. And what we've really tried to do is actually look at the things which have gone well this past year and one of the things that have gone not so well. And one of the areas we feel that we need to really look at is what we call unplanned care. So looking at cases where we use emergency services and urgent care services, because an awful amount of people go off to Headwood and Wexham Park Hospital, which actually could be treated much more locally. And also if they had prevention measures much earlier on in the pathway, they wouldn't need to go off to hospital. So a lot around our QUIP plans are focused specifically around the prevention agenda and early intervention agenda. We've got some things which we've tried out through the winter months, there's case in other areas, where we're looking to actually make those much more mainframe in the next year ahead. So making sure that those services are in place to avoid people being admitted to hospital. And when people are admitted to hospital, looking at our QUIP plans to make sure that those people have the right sort of discharge and support as much more in the community. So that's the basis of what our QUIP plans around what we call urgent non-elective care. Similarly on areas which we call planned care, making sure that again that the services there are working effectively. We're not duplicating services. We're making sure people are treated much more earlier on and looking at integrating services for things like COPD, looking at things like intermediate care services around that as well. So making those pathways much more integrated, so again people have a better experience of care. And you may have heard Nigel refer to taking 1.1 million worth of savings out of the scheme. This isn't saying we're going to just stop disinvesting in certain things. This is saying we're actually going to improve the quality in areas so that we don't have to spend more money in emergency care like we currently have been doing, or spend more money in other areas that we have been doing. So we're investing in other services which will prevent those things happening. The other thing to perhaps bear in mind is that the fruits of our labour this year and the things that are coming on stream. So we've been out for procurement for physiotherapy services, we've got new services around urgent care centres. So some of those things will actually have a benefit for the system here and be able to respond to those particular benefits. So there's quite a lot in this particular report going on around the QUIP agenda, so it's going to be quite a busy year. The other part is probably looking at the prevention agenda again and working very much with our local authority and public health colleagues about what we can do to encourage people to stop smoking, how we have an early intervention to stop people falling over and having fractures and those sort of things, and using online facilities so people can actually look at things on the internet and actually help them support self-care. There's a lot of joint working that's actually gone into those particular initiatives. So the real thrust of what we're doing is the early prevention, making sure people have the ability to self-care, and people do need care, make sure that's really responsive as possible with things to put in place. And when you do need to have a planned episode, making sure that is effective and clearly effective as possible. So that's just a quick summary and overhead without going into too much detail.
Thank you. So that's kind of our kind of 2-year plan. We've got kind of highlights from the plan. It is in a kind of a place where it's almost kind of finalised. Figures may kind of change a little bit. And we had an opportunity to look at it last month. Can you get any thoughts from everybody how it's working out?
Just very good. I mean, overall, I think it's really good. On page 33, though, which is around Better Care Fund, the third bullet point down on the right-hand side, it mentions about the various contributions being made to local authorities, etc. But there's no mention made of Bucks County Council and the WAM CCG recovered people with non-factors in that program. I just wondered if that was
we have good point. I think we have discussed this part of Nigel, this sort of the answer to that, not putting him on the spot, but it is around kind of size of populations.
Yes, and there's nothing stopping the CCG saying if there's a scheme with Buckinghamshire which want to join up with, contributing to that. So there's nothing to stop us doing that if we want to. What's the approach which NHS England took with regard to deciding where the boundaries would be is that there's a statistical unit which is used around called local output areas, which are mapped between CCGs and local authorities. And in some areas there was an overlap, and CCGs contribute to another local authority area. So in our instance here, we contribute to Surrey because of the overlap around Runnymede, but the overlap for Buckinghamshire was not big enough to warrant that adjustment in the national order. But if there is something which it makes sense for us to plan jointly with Buckinghamshire County Council, there's nothing to stop us having that discussion.
just conscious isn't it a similar size population between Runnymede and Taplow? It just looks like we've forgotten about them that was also. Thank you very much for that. I did have one other minor point, page 39, about what local people have said. And I accept all of the points that are contained on there. The only other thing I was a bit surprised about, this is why I declared my interest, we hear all the time about transport being an issue for people. I was just a bit surprised that nobody's mentioned it would be to be included on here.
It's not something specifically we picked up through any of the events that we've fed into this.
I'm not trying to bump it on just because I'm from people's places, but perhaps I am. But I met with a colleague from an external organisation on Monday, and she raised it and she was banging the table about it.
I'll go back and check through the documentation that we have and amend it. As I say, that's a section actually we've got quite a lot of information, additional information there to flesh out. But I will check that particularly.
I think just related to that point, it's probably important that we cross-check around those, because there's probably a certain section of the population that we need to make sure we picked up, so it might be worth just checking.
Well, I wanted to highlight just the kind of the focus on the parity of esteem section, which is kind of around I think there has been kind of a drive in this kind of in the guidance for this year, these next 2 year plans around this, and I think it's an important aspect. And so I wanted to really kind of highlight that around the initial work that we've done around the IAC services and things like that. There's more work I think to be done in terms of supporting people in kind of self-management skills around particular long-term conditions, and also the work in terms of the mental health liaison and in-hospital things around how people with mental health conditions and how they're supported to be able to take into account the physical conditions in a much better way. And there's a real opportunity for us as commissioners to really think about that. So it's one slide of many, but it's actually probably quite an important direction that we need to think about, particularly in national direction, as something that needs to focus our commissioning work. Yes.
General question. Am I right in thinking that essentially things are a little bit different in next year's plan from what we've done this year? Or essentially the money changes that Nigel's just outlined, and the quick. But everything else out with that is largely as we have done so far.
In terms of strategic direction, that's the bit we say we set that for the next 3 to 5 years and we'll stick with that.
Okay.
The policy section is the bit that maybe is slightly different and probably more sophisticated than we had in the current year's plan.
In which case, within the quick bit, there's lots of very general descriptive terms rather than, so it says reduce non-elective admissions, reduce follow-up ratios. That translates into fewer patients will go to outpatients, but it doesn't say necessarily which areas, which specialties, and it doesn't say how much savings you're assuming against each of those within our plan. So we have a 4.1 savings, not a 1.6 as Rachel just said, as I heard Nigel correctly, from the script, which presumably is delivered by all those different things. Somewhere we presumably have some assumptions behind all of that.
Yes.
I completely understand the difficulty in getting that right, but I just wonder whether we're being clear enough if we don't articulate, if we don't quantify some of these.
We do have those quantified as a big schedule for it. Now, the stage in the planning process is that we've only done our initial submission with a draft of those particular plans and those assumptions. And now our learning from the past has been that we need to test those assumptions a bit more and get more robust, make sure we've got really robust plans behind them. And also be able to describe how we're going to do that service implementation. So is it a very contractual change, or is it something where it needs a bit of a culture change, a hearts and minds type of change behind it around that? So that's the piece of work we're doing between now and the end of March and getting a little bit more detail behind those things.
Okay, so I'll push you a little bit further.
Yeah.
How does the governing body influence actually whether we go for 80% of the money and the reduction in activity in one area and 20% somewhere else? I.e. the proportions, because it sounds like we're going to be presented with the assumptions and the fait accompli as opposed to potentially as a governing body influencing where we think those relative priorities are. Because I can't pick out the relative priorities and the importance of the different bits from within the existing document. And I'm being a bit hard.
No,
forgive me for throwing that in your direction.
Judith, do you want to pick up on that?
I mean, I find that quite difficult as a GP clinical lead, that people actually having to make changes aren't actually, if we're not carefully involved in any numbers or percentages. And I think in the past there's been a gap, and it's a matter of looking at that financial number to fill the gap with an assumption that the people at the coalface can make those savings. I think very often the people that put the numbers in and percentages have no concept of what happens at the coalface, because it's actually really difficult to reduce referrals and things. So I think it needs real clinical input to know what we can achieve, rather than a number that fits into the gap. And I think in the past it's been done not by anybody clinical, and then we get into trouble for not achieving it. But you know, what can we achieve?
Shall I attempt to bridge some of that? Because I've probably kind of Rachel and I have had some exposure to kind of bridging that, and I think a very valid point is in the past how we've done that. So the way that we have kind of looked at that in terms of management is how much change can we make, and where's the biggest wins, if you like, in terms of making the change. Where should we be concentrated our clinical efforts? Because it does take a lot of clinical efforts to bring in to make that, is by using some of the work which has been done on unwarranted variation. And then you can, so unwarranted variation allows us to, I think that is articulated in the pack, which is around how we look at, you know, how we compare with other with other systems, and how other clinical systems do things differently to be able to produce better health outcomes, perhaps with a different change in the way that we do things. And that involves primary and secondary care doctors getting together to agree those pathways. So I think it must be said that we have got some of that understanding. We've got the understanding of where the 5 top areas are, where we want to make the wins. We've started to work with secondary care clinicians, so GPs working with hospital doctors to be able to look at the pathways of care and change those pathways of care so that they're more efficient and have better outcomes for patients. So we've done some of that in urology services, which is looking at kind of back and spinal services and musculoskeletal services, and then gynecology and dermatology. And so there's a number of areas that have been kind of the work started on. There's a lot more work to do. There's a lot more clinical engagement to do. I think you're absolutely right to get the clinicians in to understand what the numbers mean. But that work is kind of, I think we refined that process a little bit more, much better than it was a couple of years ago, but it's kind of come into place.
Yeah, a good example is that when we tried to reduce the variation in referrals, we worked really hard, and I forget the number now, is it 115 per thousand?
15, yeah.
That was the sort of line we had to be under. And actually we achieved it by working hugely hard. And then I was at a meeting and they said to me, well, what can you get it down to next year? And I'm thinking, you have no concept of what it's like getting it down. You can't keep reducing it.
But it's not necessarily.
Because I think it's better when it's joined up in secondary care and you're looking at pathways.
So in the past it was very much that, but in this especially after the last year, it's getting the kind of the real GPs and hospital doctors to talk to each other, which is, and I've been in some of those meetings, I mean to all of them, I mean some of those meetings where actually the ideas about kind of making better pathways of care kind of come from both sides, both GPs and some of those things have started to work, but I think we've got more to do there. So I think there's more to articulate in where are the areas, with the hospital we're going to be concentrating on over the next 2 years. I think, as Rachel said, the figures for that are kind of coming out in the next couple of weeks so that we can really put those into more detail.
Okay, my other challenge is there are 7 pages of things in your section, Rachel, which, if that's only looking to have 1.4 million of extra investment and 4 million of savings, that's a huge number of lots of little different changes. Are we actually going to make the biggest improvement in quality of care for patients by spreading the field so widely? Would we perhaps not be better to really focus collectively with our partners in healthcare on a smaller number of headings?
I think that's a good point, and it's sort of a big challenge around it. I think a lot of big numbers around non-elective care, a lot of things we've actually sort of started on part of the pathway. It's not that it take a huge amount of effort to move forward with that. So some of these things that are starting from a zero base will take a long time to do, while other things are actually in train already, so it'll be a lot easier to put in place. But our big effort will be moved around the non-elective care pathway specifically. And I think that as we've just heard about the unwarranted variation of things, the work, this does take quite a long time working with secondary care colleagues, getting that agreement, going back and checking it clinically with them. But I think we also have got in mind the work that's being done nationally from the Royal College of Surgeons, those particular pathways around there. We can use some of that as well. But I know the point is well made about this actually with lots of things, but I do think we do need a number of spread of things to do as well. And it's not just a small number of people doing this, there is a number of people working across the CCG on this, and supported by the CSU as well. And there's also, I think, as well, is bearing in mind that some of the things we have to do because they're a national requirement to do those things.
And some of these things in here will feed into the 5-year strategy. So they're around that. How do we get some big transformational change? And some of the issues in here, whilst they're sort of integrated primary care treatment, in 1 month. There's a massive piece of work around how do we get that driving forward to get some big transformational change. So I think it looks as if it's a big spend, and we need to acknowledge it is a lot of work, but we're trying to achieve some really big changes.
It's 4 million change in the money, enough reward or whatever then. If you actually think, if you've got a lot of people involved, and you think the costs of therefore doing all that, are we actually getting enough return for our money? I know that sounds horribly financial and not healthcare, but actually you do need to be looking as though is it really worth all that effort? Because the reason for making savings is so we can go on providing other aspects of care. And actually, we're spending quite a lot of money in getting there.
I think it's the quality of it, isn't it? Rather than just the queue. It's the queue bit of the quick.
Okay, but in that case, it would be good to have quality measures and numbers and what have you in the document, rather than just words and descriptive terms. Reduce this, reduce that. Doesn't I think really try to show why that's improving quality.
Yeah, it is, the headings used are obviously under the outcomes framework, which is about how they improve quality outcomes. The broad heading around that is at the top around that, and obviously underpinning this is a load of set of very boring trajectories about how you're going to move from A to B and how you're going to measure those things in line as well. So it's quite an arduous process to go through.
Just to build on that, for me, the key thing is to have a really good business case behind every scheme, which has been appropriately looked at and supported both by clinicians and managers. And we've gone through and we thought, well, how much will it actually cost to do this project versus the savings coming out of it? And we've had that really sensible prioritisation, because you're absolutely right, it's not worth spending 100,000 to say 10,000. You've got to get your priorities right. And I think that's one of the good things about some of the proposed changes around performance and really bringing that into rather than federated events, being something which is CC, because that also allows a lot more local clinical review and challenge and support to those schemes, and that will make a significant difference.
Okay. I'm going to move us on then, which brings us nicely on to kind of the Better Care Fund, and we're going to welcome Nick Davis from the Royal Borough is going to support Vicky in talking us through a real joint approach in the new world to how we're going to transform some services across health and social care.
Thank you, and apologies, this is a paper copy of the presentation which I'll circulate around to you. Thanks for inviting me, and I wanted really to, I know that the board will have been cited of the previous template and the draft submission in terms of Better Care Funds. Obviously there's been a lot of work that's been done jointly between the CCG and the local authority, and I think that's really a positive thing, and I think it's got us to where we're at today, which I think is a strong submission. So I was coming here today really to reflect on that, but also to talk really about what's moved on from the original submission, which was back in January, start of February, you probably cited on. So the main thing that we've been looking at since there, if I take you through the slide back, is what the vision means for the resident and patient. So we've reflected there on the first slide the overarching themes of the health and wellbeing strategy. It was just to re-emphasise that that's the overarching principles that give us our guidelines in respect of the Better Care Fund. In terms of background, as we're all aware, there's a national requirement for us to put a submission forward. We, I think, have got on a great integrated platform to work from, so a real opportunity. So the short-term reablement support service, which is an integrated service, and also the recently commissioned prevention service that's focused very much on falls prevention, as well as preventing emergency admissions as a whole. So I think we've really got a good basis to proceed on. I think the key word in terms of the Better Care Fund is ambition. How ambitious are we to integrate across health and social care for real benefits to residents, patients, or people ultimately? So how ambitious are we, and what does that mean in terms of pooling resources? And undoubtedly your discussions around the 2-year planning and the 5-year planning fit into that, and we need to be consistent with that and meeting the challenge together. So in terms of what's been submitted already, a narrative's been submitted along with some financial information where we put in the existing funding that we have and work together on in terms of things like winter pressures monies and the initiatives we deliver from that. What we focused on in the last month really is the metrics, because we've had to set targets, we've been required to set targets around some key areas, and I just wanted to take you through those as we go through. So turning to the third slide, the key bit here I think is that this is one fund, and we need one governance around this fund, even though we've got the respective governance structures around the local authority and the CCG. And that gives us some challenges, but I think that gives us some opportunity as well. I think this is our opportunity, our one opportunity to make a difference for the individual, and there's one opportunity to make this work. I've also included in there the aspiration around one point of contact for patients and service users. So that's the numeric. And you can see as I go through, I just tried to, I think, take a slightly different approach with this presentation to pull out very much along the metrics what this actually means, rather than giving you the template which has got all the detailed information around the metrics. The 5% is a figure around reduction of emissions, which is the basis on which we're saying that we will be able to look to reinvest that funding into prevention services. So there's work that I know Nigel and our finance lead Alan have done detailed work on that, which is the key. It's the key equation really in terms of how we manage to reinvest resources into prevention services. So that takes us on into the next slide, which is really pointing to the fact that, and I've got, that should read 15-16 in terms of the funding pool, the date for that amount of funding being in the funding pool, but that 8 million is combined resources from the local authority and the CCG, and can build upon some of the work I talked about earlier, and really I think does allow us the opportunity for innovation if we grab that. Moving on then, in terms of the rest of the slides, they really pick out on, for this submission and this sign-off, it's around the metrics, it's around the key areas that we need to set targets for. And there's no getting away from the fact that we need to set targets, and we've worked through those meticulously to work out if they're realistic targets, if they're deliverable, and actually how we're going to achieve and evidence that. So in terms of the 120, that's our target around new admissions to residential and nursing care, and we note the trajectory is a downward trajectory from 170 admissions, new admissions in 11-12. So we've come a long way already, because the 12-13 outturn data is at 132 admissions. So we're retaining ambition here, but we're also being realistic about the fact that it's more, some of this is around maintenance of that good work and target, given the pressures we have locally around self-funders and the new requirements that the care bill will bring in terms of assessment. So we think in terms of a target that's achievable, and that the extension of some of the adult social care transformation programme, where we've worked hard to get those numbers down to enable people to live more independently, is realistic, and we've worked, as you know, on outcome-based commissioning and looking at health input into that model of home care, extending the telecare programme we've got into telehealth and making sure that that's integrated. So, real opportunity there, and I think that's an explanation around why we're setting that as the target there. Turning over the 85%. It is the target around re-ablement, and so reference the short-term re-ablement support team. This is a target about who's living independently 91 days after discharge, and we've set an improvement target here, which is ambitious, around 6%, to move us from the good performance we've got already from a very well-performing team to be even more ambitious. And I think in terms of that, where we look to get that improvement is through further investment, reviewing through our joint intermediate care review that's just about to conclude, and also with the outcome-based commissioning taking a re-ablement approach to home care services beyond the 6 weeks. It's in that we set that ambition around 85%. Moving on, 10 is the target we've set around the average monthly delayed discharge, which is a reduction from the current performance of 11, which is it's a snapshot indicator. But in terms of how we'll achieve that through our combined adult social care and health resources, we've got that articulated in the paper, and I think Vicky may want to add something about how we will do that as we go through. Turning over then 3%, so fewer avoidable admissions, fewer avoidable emergency admissions. So that's in the region of 100 admissions being prevented in a year. And that again is the ambition we're setting within an indicator where we have to set a target, but we think that through our integration, through public health prevention services and such like, we can do that. Last slide that I'll concentrate on, because I'm conscious of time, is that 488 is the current number of injuries, admissions in terms of injuries due to falls. Referenced our prevention service, and we've set a target around 10% reduction through of those falls on an annual basis through that. The final 2 slides cover a summary of the outcomes, and then crucially the next steps, a lot of which are around continued engagement and consultation with users, which we've started, given that we've had a tight time frame to turn this submission around, and also looking at how we make sure that we implement and deliver the services that we've articulated in the submission we will deliver in order to achieve those targets and the outcomes that we outlined.
Thank you. Thanks for coming very clear in the presentation.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
The sheet, it's probably an ignorant question, but anyway, it says 120, new admissions to residential nursing care down from 170. Given the situation in WAM where there are 48 nursing homes, which is probably one of the biggest in the land, I understand that a large proportion of those are not from WAM, they're from outside. From London and whatever, because they're there as establishments. But if that number are there and full, whether they're from local residents or from London or from anywhere, it still impacts on our health costs, because you've got the same numbers overall. You might reduce WAM's admissions, the residents, but they'll fill up with people from elsewhere costing as much. So how do you reduce the number of care home beds when it's a private run service like that?
Well, I mean, there's two. I mean, it's a very good point. I think. I mean, the measure there is is our admissions.
It's a resident population, yeah.
It is our is the 120 is those that we are funding in terms of eligible need through adult social care. It includes self-funders who run out of money, for example, and require an ongoing service.
But if they're still full of people from elsewhere who fall over and need to go in, then financially it's the same impact on you.
Well, this is just one strand. This is one indicator that we're judged by, and it's an indicator of the health of our community-based services. So it's not going to cover everything.
It's not a cost.
Well, the problem is that you're absolutely right, sorry to intervene, is you're absolutely right, is there's two bits to it which kind of builds on what Nick said, sorry Nick, if I just
It's a showless talk, it is.
But you're absolutely right, is that the cost, no matter who is in the borough, if say a London Borough places somebody here or Buxton, and they go into Wrexham, and they're with a GP in WAM, you bear the health cost. The other cost to us, which I don't think we should forget in terms of what happens, is that the local authority, because it will be a joint health and social care responsibility, also bears some of that responsibility around the safeguarding elements. So, you're absolutely right, and you're saying, what can we do about it? There is little that we can do because of the market forces which enable...
What we need to do is have less nursing homes.
Well, that's the dilemma.
You can't do that because it's a private facility.
There are two, if I just pick up on that quickly, there are two things I think that we're able to do. One is through the planning guidance, which is being refreshed. Whilst we cannot prevent a private enterprise, we can articulate that, actually, and when we do get asked as the local authority, as the from the adult social care perspective, what we think about applications that are coming through in terms of residential and nursing, and we will articulate that, in terms of our market position statement, we need less residential, we need, more provision in terms of nursing, dementia, and that, that's how we articulate
extra
that.
Care and those sorts of issues whereby people can be enabled to remain in the community, and it's based also, isn't it, Nick, on our predictions for the future about how many older people are there. But it is a fight. You are absolutely right.
It's a huge health cost.
It's a huge.
It's
a significant issue.
You can reduce the number of local people, but the health cost.
And because people want to be in the borough, people want to come and retire to the borough, they want to be in home, because it's a healthy place to live.
It's because a lot of nursing homes can go into.
I think that's where the conversation can this is the opportunity with the special care fund. I think the funding's there, the metrics are set in terms of what we have to report, but there's other stuff we can do jointly
but is
to
the borough
unpick that.
Is the borough minded to look at reducing? I know you can't close them as the private enterprises, but are they minded to look at having a lower number of homes?
Vicky, we had a joint session with a market session with the local residential nursing providers. We've got a market position statement which says this is what we need and this is what we don't need going forwards, and we're looking to get providers engaged in that conversation, because ultimately we're not going to be advocating for that provision for people or placing people in that provision, then it does have an impact on providers, many of whom do rely on local authority placements into those homes.
This does give us an opportunity, though, to jointly work together around commissioning jointly and shaping the market jointly, rather than a health economy and a social care economy, and that joins it up. And I think in terms of integration, as Nick has said, in answer to your question, I don't think there's a quick answer, because I think the answer is in the short term that will happen, but there is leverage around as putting some of that together to try and do some planning to prevent excessive numbers of places where we're not going to be commissioning with them. So I think there are opportunities as we move forward around that to jointly commission and manage the market better together.
Thank you. Peter.
Can I just ask, local authorities have many powers, one of which is as a planning authority. Is there any discussion with the planning around this?
Yeah, there is, and you know, our lead member will make you know, a very strong representation about what the adult social care and the health needs are, and how we don't need any more of this provision. However, the reality of planning, and as you alluded to, you know, there are constraints, and the planners have to work within legislation as well. But that conversation happens, and absolutely, if there's a planning application that comes in, we comment on that and have an ability to influence and certainly input into what information the panel has when granting planning permission. So if we're saying, well, actually, this is our needs locally, we can reflect that back in. And perhaps what we need to do is reflect that in from a stronger health and social care combined perspective.
I think we mustn't take our eye off the ball. I think the measure of reduction in nursing home beds is obviously quite a crude marker to sort of find some kind of guide about the quality of or provision of community services. We within the CCG and working with our social care colleagues must take our eye off the quality within the nursing home beds that we've got, because actually a well-managed nursing or residential facility can be very beneficial for the health community, patients and so on. So that is a measure, but I don't think we should get too hung up and obsessed actually about that, and actually we could use our nursing home residential beds to our advantage.
Yeah, and I think that the point is with these, you know, putting them, I chose to present these with staff figures just because otherwise you get into lengthy debate about detail. I think the points where I made that actually what we need to do is be understanding not just that metric, but everything else around it, and obviously the quality work that's been jointly worked on in terms of the care homes project is again a significant joint work that we're doing to recognise that actually we need that sector. It's just we need the right size. We need the right size of that sector.
Is there a risk of there being an unintended consequence if we reduce admissions to residential and nursing homes? You may end up with more acute admissions instead, because that is the default place where people go when they, inverted commas, fall over. I don't mean literally fall over, but they no longer care for themselves. And if you're thrusting, it feels to me like you may be thrusting in two different directions at once, and therefore one or other of your aspirations here might fail, potentially both.
It's about appropriateness of those admissions, I think, for nursing homes. And both Nick and Shane will be able to speak in a lot more detail about what they've done over the last few years, but there's been a real shift in people who have been admitted to nursing homes who've now gone into residential care, and those who've gone previously into residential care into home care. So it's been a shift, as I understand it, more around the appropriateness of those admissions and the level of admission and the level of care that they receive at that period of their lives.
I mean, and for me, it links up about the quality and safeguarding issue is one of the things that we you know, we've got the community-based services which support people, and in terms of the work that we need to do with the acute trust is around how the acute trust responds on entry to an A&E or a minor injuries unit. That's where we've been targeting some of the winter precious money so that we get people out, or we use residential care in an appropriate way as a sort of respite short-term measure rather than them going short-term and end up there long-term. I think the point is that you've raised is it's around the quality and competence and skills of people in the care homes, which is the care homes project, and the quality of care, and that it all links up in a way that means that we're trying our best to manage people in the community for as long as we can. But yes, you know, there is a place where people will require that level of 24-hour oversight and management. But with assisted technology and those sorts of things, we could keep more people at home for a longer period and more sustained at home, preventing injuries with all those things in place.
Could I just ask a couple of quick questions around the scale of the ambition, I guess? Because in terms of the admissions to residential nursing homes, it's going down from, you were saying 132 is the output?
Yes, yeah.
To 120. But over the last 2 years, it's reduced by... So I mean, I appreciate there's a drop point and it levels off, but I just a question really about ambition. And sorry, the other one was around the delayed discharge. So it's current performance is 11 and it's down to 10.
Yeah.
Given the significance of the additional finances that are going into this scheme, are we confident that the ambition is right?
I mean, I think in answer to the ambition around the 120, I think that is, as I said, I think given the demographics, given what people have said here about squeezing that market and that resource too tightly, it's been a very carefully considered target that we've set there, because I think we recognise, as I say, the care bill, other things that are coming in, where it's ambitious enough, I think, to be looking at maintaining that sort of target for the sort of population we have going forward. And we've seen that significant drop, which I think has been about the reduction in inappropriate referrals into residential nursing, and that's what that looks like now. So I think it's sometimes it's ambitious enough to be running to stay still, I think, in terms of that particular indicator. I guess, like everything else, will be challenged potentially by NHS England on that in terms of if we are ambitious enough. So let's see. But that there's a rationale behind it, which we've articulated in the actual submission itself. I mean, in terms of the delayed discharge, I don't know, Vicky, if you want to say anything on that.
Benchmark very well generally against delayed discharges, and sometimes it's how much further can you go, and we didn't have anything else really to benchmark ourselves against. We push us a lot further. So I mean that's what we've gone for, because we don't think we're a lot further than we can go on that particular figure. But I think what we can do is to focus much more on the health delayed discharges, because when you look at the breakdown in that number, actually very few are down to social care delayed discharges, the majority are around health. And I think our real focus needs to be over the next year about working with the computer trusts, trying to get those discharge procedures really in place, get them flowing through. So it's about focusing our effort more really.
And just following, so is it a work in progress, or has there already been discussions about what the ambition and the targets are going to be for 15-16? When we significantly crank up the investment in this scheme. So is that still to be done?
Still to be done, yeah. The targets in here just relate to 14-15.
Final thing on the numbers, you've got your 5% slide for reductions in emergency, and then a bit further on you've got a 3% slide. Admittedly the word emergency creeps into the second one, but that means the other two are made up of non-emergencies, and I can't quite see how Better Care Fund and the Royal Borough come into elective admission reduction. Forgive me.
That's right, it's 3% of emergency admissions, 5% I don't think is.
So I was just wondering whether this is right at all.
No. We haven't got anything in there for 5% reduction in emergencies.
It just says in admissions for acute.
Yeah, no.
To give you your 1.2 million, and I was trying to work out whether
We've got 3% reduction in emergency admissions
and that gives you
every year
1.2
for a 5-year period.
That's
To give us 15%.
and that gives you 1.2 million to reinvest.
And that's what we're just in the process of working back at the moment.
For this, my only defence is this is live document. We've only just, in terms of how quickly we've had to put things together, it's changing hour by hour, if you like. So apologies for that, but well,
I think that's going to be a good articulation of where we are. I think there's a lot of, in terms of governance around it, around through the Health and Wellbeing Board. So there is kind of some more kind of work in progress around kind of Health and Wellbeing Board citing, especially, I suppose some of the future discussions around planning of nursing and care homes and kind of those kind of debates will play out in the Health and Wellbeing Board as the Health and Wellbeing Board matures, as it is going to be able to kind of support the government around the fund.
Yeah, I think this is really just the starting point. A lot of what's being said is pointing to the ambition.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. I'd like to then move us quickly on then to the kind of, we've got our 2-year plan. We've looked at the kind of the Better Care Fund. we're really kind of going into now time to kind of really kind of put more attention into our 5-year plans. And Rachel, you're going to kind of talk us through the latest conversations around the 5-year plan.
So the latest update on 5-year plan, we haven't got any updated sheets in front of you because the last few weeks things have been moving and changing quite considerably around that, and obviously when we presented where we were then, it's a very useful opportunity to take on board people's concerns around that. I think that the important point to make is the 5-year plan is bigger than just not only in length of time, but also it's a bigger area it covers and bigger organisations it covers. The CCGs have been given the enviable task of making and collating and pulling together a 5-year strategic plan, not just for one CCG, but a number of CCGs, and making sure we take into account all what is going on in the Better Care Fund, making sure we take into account what provider strategies are, and being able to make sure that when you actually put all this together, you have a cohesive vision going forward. And with one organisation isn't going to do something that is going to have an unintended consequence on another organisation, so the benefits of a 5-year plan can't be achieved. So the key part of this, on the first part of this, I'm going to hand over to Alan briefly, it's been trying to put together what we call the Health and Care Systems Leaders Group. The strapline for this nationally is higher quality care for all now and for future generations. So as you see, it's going beyond making sure what we're doing, not just for the here and now, but we're actually having some sustainability going forward, that we have a stable financial position in all health and care organisations. We have something where we know we can improve the quality of health and social care for people. And what that quality is actually having a good community to live in as part of that business. So it is a tremendously big piece of work. And for the length of time I've been in the NHS, I don't think we've ever done anything quite as complex and complicated as this, and trying to get all everybody pulling in the right direction and agreeing that vision. So one of the things we've agreed to set up is this Health and Care Systems Leaders Group. What we're trying to do is actually look at the 5-year plan in a way which says which are the things that are really, really local, and which are the things which are bigger than local, that have got a consequence within the whole of East Berkshire and have a consequence outside East Berkshire as well as a region. So some of the things we're having to put together are around strategies around very specialist services. So where are we going to go to get very specialist cancer services, trauma networks and all those type of things. And they're things that we don't commission. So we have to have those conversations to understand how others commissioning the impacts are going to have on us. We also have to think about, not only about the elective work streams and the urgent care work streams which we've talked about, but also what's the impact overall on mental health services, children's service, maternity service. So you can see how big this is looking. And a lot of our work already starting on the Better Care Fund has been particularly around more focused around the elderly patients as well, but obviously there's other things as well that local authorities are responsible for. So it's a very ambitious piece of work. And the goalposts keep changing rather nationally. And we were expecting to have our feedback on what we thought we were going to do back much earlier than we had, but we only received it at the weekend. So we haven't had a chance to have a good look at this and say, are the things we're suggesting the right things to be doing? I mean, I think one of the key challenges you put to us last time, which we really take on board, is what's the language? How do we keep this simple? How do we make sure people can understand what it is we're talking about? And we also make sure it is a health and care plan, not just about health. And a lot of the documents are coming down the health stream rather than the care stream as well. So quite big challenges. And actually really thinking about who is this the benefit for? So how can people really understand what the benefits are going to be from doing a 5-year strategic plan? So we're trying to take those things on board in doing this. So I'm just going to hand over to Alan briefly about the Health and Care Leaders Group.
Thank you, thanks Rachel. So as Rachel said, we've set up a health and care system leaders group across the geographical patch. And that's mainly in terms of ensuring that we engage with our providers, both acute and community providers, to understand that they're cited on our plans, they are aware of and able to contribute to some plans, because as you've just seen around the BCF presentation, a lot of this is predicated on taking money and activity out of the queue to allow us to invest in the different community services. So they have to be sighted on and aware of that to understand some of the implications and ideally work with us to redesign those services. So when I say we've established, that's probably a grand phrase, we have had a first meeting of the System Chiefs Group, and that included, so it was representation from all 3 CCGs, so the 3 CCG chairs, the acute providers and the unitary authorities were all there, community providers, we invited public health and we invited South Central Ambulance Service, but they were unable to attend the first meeting. Just managing to get that first meeting was a challenge. But actually what was really good coming out of it was there was absolute agreement from people in the room that it was the right thing to do. We needed to come together and we needed to have these discussions on a bigger geographical footprint than just an individual CCG. There was discussions around the governance, and we need to be really clear about what the governance of any such group would be, and it's absolutely not taking away from the autonomy of individual CCGs, individual foundation trusts, individual unitary authorities, because that has to maintain the autonomy. But what it is an opportunity to really put into action, so implement the strategies that all of the local CCGs are developing. Just so you're aware of who the membership of it was. So from, when I say the acute trust, it was Edward Watson and Finley, because they obviously are a key player, particularly for Bracknell CCG. We had a debate about whether we should or shouldn't include children's health parks, but actually it was felt at this stage that you then get to the stage where do you stop really in this geographical patch. So the decision was taken at this stage not to include children's health parks, but we reserve the right, if you like, to extend it wider if we needed to. And the first meeting was around looking at what types of areas should this focus on, and how does this group best add value to the health and social care system. And I think it came out, and Adrian can come through this as well, because Adrian was there, I think we were saying, if you remember, I'm going to take you back to the original planning guidance that came out before Christmas. It was talking about 6 service models, 6 new service models that we had to take forward around transformation. One of them was around patient and public involvement, absolutely writ large through everything we do. So we need to ensure that we have the appropriate engagement and membership with that. It was around having wider primary care at scale, and it was about a modern model of integration. And that those two, around primary care at scale and integration, are things that absolutely are best done and can arguably only be done at individual CCG local authority level. But the next 2 are around planned care, so how do you get the best efficiency out of planned care, and how do we redesign our urgent care system to be a modern urgent care system. And to do that, you need to engage on a bigger geographical footprint. So that was one of the remits that we were thinking that this group would take. And the last service model of the 6 is around specialised services. So how do we get specialised services playing into that? So that's something that we still need to square off. So we've had the meeting. It was facilitated by the King's Fund. I think it was, I'm confident to say it was a success, a successful meeting, and we're working on getting another date in the future. And we will obviously include governing body members in that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. You know, the guidance kind of came out in December around kind of the unit of planning and how we were going to make sense of all of that. I think the system has been having some conversations around unit of planning, so each individual organisation. There is no kind of taking away the governance from, as Andy said, kind of each individual organisation is going to be accountable to its own kind of system, but there isn't necessarily. So we talked about the Better Care Fund, and about one of the points that was made was around the reduction in acute care and the 5% reduction in acute admissions, and how that's going to be planned out over the next 5 years. And Anne's kind of point was, are you going to have enough capacity to be able to in the community to be able to really take on board that? Well, you cannot have that conversation without having ambulance service providers, community providers in the room with the acute trust. And so it's that level really that we need to be able to. And I think we got very good buy-in from all the people in the room representing their organisations, that we need to be able to work much smartly, more smartly around that, and especially the acute trust, especially when we worked in the really good contribution to So we are hopeful that that's going to really kind of then be able to allow us to shape our 5-year plans much better, and especially kind of, you know, the showing points of the last meeting and how that works really with health and social care, and how social care are involved in that. We had some really good discussions at that around the transformational agenda in social care and how that plays into the system. So although there's not a kind of a glossy presentation today, there is kind of a much more, I think, movement in terms of what's been happening, how the leadership is going to take some of those plans forward for the 5-year plans for the CCG.
I think what would be helpful from the group, from the board, would actually to have understanding about how do you want to be kept informed about this process, because all the guys and the health and wellbeing board that have to sign off this marvellous big plan at the end of June time. It's, as you say, it's a massive ambitious undertaking to actually do this piece of work. I think, you know, the key bit is how do we keep all the stakeholders up to date with what's going on, and obviously everybody can't be involved with absolutely everything, but where we're looking at the things which are outside one particular CCG area, like plan care strategy and the urgent care. We've got some subgroups sort of working those up and feeding back and then coming back on that. It's thinking, how do we keep you up to speed with what's going on rather than just a governing body, and how much information do you want, where, you know, that type of thing, which would be really good to have a feedback on actually doing that as well. And the same is, I think, very much about public and patient engagement part of that as well.
Can I just bring in, so learning from other areas where you have, say, cabinets of system leaders, and I think you have to keep things simple and say actually what's the purpose of the group, and every single member of that leadership group needs to understand why they're there. The whole purpose of the group coming together is to almost act, I suppose, as the board of a very good company that understands its customer, say John Lewis is a board, and every single member of that leadership group needs to know kind of why they're there. They're there to unlock anything that doesn't add value to caring for the vulnerable 88-year-old example patient that we're all about. So the work we've done with Professor Muir Gray talks about thinking about the whole system benefiting our customer or our patients or residents, and therefore we need to see, both as residents, patients, board members, whoever we are in the community, what that group's doing, why it's there, and why it's championing the needs of the customer for the system. Because what we're not there for is to represent the ambulance trust, the acute trust, the CCG, the local authority, because it's not about the needs of those institutions and organisations. So we've never brought all of those organisations and institutions together to do one job with one common purpose, to look at this as one company, as it were, and one system. And I think if everyone can see that group with that very simple, clear vision, and we're feeding back what's being achieved by the group for the purposes of those individual vulnerable patients or residents, then I think we'll start to get some real assurances that there is a point to this group and actually we're progressing.
Can I just add to this? I can't answer your question at all, but add a bit more to it. One of the things I particularly picked up on the reading the Better Care Fund plan was around a concern that grew in my mind. I'm speaking more with my day hat on rather than a CCG hat, talking about people working in the health and social care sector, people that are employed, etc. But there's a lot of people who volunteer, both directly within the centre, but also just within the very local communities. And I feel that there's a bit of a gap there. I'm not sure how you bridge that gap, because that, you know, there are millions of different groups. There are individuals that just get on and do something, and they can have quite a significant impact on an individual's life. For all the things that we aspire to achieve, there are people who just don't know how they're doing it. So I don't know how you can reflect that, perhaps, but it's not patient voice, it's not particularly public voice either. I don't want to just say, oh, it's a voluntary sector, because sometimes these are people just getting off the bat, so I'm doing something.
That's a really interesting point, Swap. And Yesterday I was at the Expo conference and I went to 2 workshops which was about how do you really get good community support and look into the voluntary sector. Some really good examples from up and down the country coming through now. And some learning from that that was really good to share with the board and health quality, the social care colleagues around that, because they were looking about what's our current community asset. So what have we already got in the community that is good voluntary things? How are they connected with the community? That's our asset base. So what else? And areas of the country where they've actually encouraged more community voluntary support by doing challenge funds around it as well. So I think there's quite a lot of learning we can use, and we're starting on this journey, but it would be good to talk about that.
I think the World have done quite a bit around that, which we've kind of looked at and worked together on. Just the market forces, the market position statement that they made a kind of a year, maybe less than a year ago, was very much around kind of what's he going to be looking for in the future. And that's not just to kind of voluntary sector, it's just to everyone. What the future might be in terms of looking across the health and social care. So I think the main kind of Borough kind of led that we contributed a little bit in the course. But there's more doing to say setting them out the marketplace for kind of voluntary sector and the private sector to be able to deliver some of the things that need to be delivered.
Can I answer Rachel's question of what we want to know and how often and etc. I'm going to fire a slightly different question, but it might help others to answer. What would the membership of the CCG be expecting this governing body to be doing in terms of approving or overseeing the development of a 5-year strategy? Because we are here to help oversee that whole process. And we need to remember the membership in that. If the membership would be expecting us to say we approve this or we don't approve this, as well as it having to officially be approved by the Health and Wellbeing Board, then we need an opportunity to comment early enough to make a difference, because otherwise there's no point. If it's a question of they expect us to listen to all the things that Peter's just saying about actually remembering why we're here, what we're doing, that will basically give you a steer, and then we delegate that to our executive officers to actually contribute and approve. I'm not quite sure what the membership would feel about developing that, because they're going to be a key part of delivering whatever is that strategy.
So it's to take that to the membership, isn't it?
And I think there's a big danger that the membership aren't involved.
Well, it sounded like we had all those other stakeholders just now who were great and good, but the membership weren't there other than represented by the chair, which is good. But if you're going to be a membership organisation, then you need to make sure you're at least letting them know that this is going on. And these are the big headings.
And I think that's a big danger of where we're at, that the actual membership and the ground force isn't aware of the opportunities, what's going on.
But
I guess I don't feel they're as engaged as they should be.
I think there is kind of the guidance around the kind of quality of primary care and the role, as Annie was saying, is one of those big kind of strands which goes through a 5-year plan. They're not as engaged as they could, but we've got steps in place to be able to engage them. So we've got 2 people who are hopefully going to be taking forward some primary care strategy work to be able to work with practices. So we've got 2 clinical leads who are going to be doing that work. We've got some support around that to be able to create that 5-year vision for primary care, which is part of that strand. So there's elements where I think people are involved. But putting the whole thing together to the Assembly, we haven't kind of quite articulated that yet.
I think as a member of the governing body, I think I'm here to represent them in their commissioning role, not their primary care development plan. That's part of the overall 5-year strategy. But our focus is on the services we commission as part of that 5-year strategy. And we are here to try and make sure that that process is working well for our membership and our patients.
It's quite interesting at the county meeting last week. talking about the 5-year plan. Vicky was there. I was quite shocked, really. And obviously the King's Fund's talking about greater collaboration and practices working together. And there was almost a sort of knee-jerk reaction, wasn't there? Like, actually in the 5 years, we want to be left to get on with the job we do brilliantly, and we don't want outside interference, and we just want to get on and do it. It was quite interesting that they weren't really ready for the conversation.
That is no different to consultants in the
No,
acute sector. For many, many years, we've always been accused of being stuck in a rut and we're
But I think that's what the 5-year thing is all about, delivering it in a different way. That's a massive conversation. And, you know, it's time consuming to spend with these people, not tell them what it's about. Because actually, if you tell them, they go back into their box and say, whoa.
It's a longer term.
Yeah. So I think we have to work to lock that in. More about
I'd like to kind of, conscious of time, just close down the kind of conversation on the phone. Obviously, we need to get more about and keep everybody and membership involved in that conversation. I'd just like to kind of, Vicky, are you able to do the prevention in an enabling strategy in kind of 5 minutes?
5 minutes, okay, right. Not going to go over it. So the prevention and enabling strategy for adults, this is something Angela Cole, who's joint place between ourselves and the Royal Borough, has developed on our behalf. I think actually is a very strong prevention strategy. She's due to a family crisis unable to come today, so I thought I'd present it. It's a 3-year strategy, goes up to 2017, very much fits into a number of things of what we've been doing around the Better Care Fund, and comes out of the needs set out in our joint strategic needs assessment and the health and wellbeing strategy. So it's really about implementing that. I think one of the important points to say at the beginning of this process, Andrew actually did some work with local people, asking them what outcomes they would like from a prevention strategy. And the strategy is actually based around that. So it starts off from the point of saying these are the outcomes that local people have said, and therefore these are a range of things that we are going to do in order to address those. We've already started this, and some of the things that are actually in the Better Care Fund finances for next year support the prevention strategy very much. That is particularly the Keep Well, Stay Safe, Keep Well service, always get that one all the way around, and the full service, making sure that's in place. So we've not actually waited for every board that we need to sign this off to start the strategy. There's some really important things that we think we need to be doing up front. So we've done that. And there are a number of other areas in terms of immediate priorities around a carer strategy that someone from this team's leading on pulling together. Some of that work's already started as well. So what it really is all about is trying to make sure that we get prevention in at absolutely every stage where we can, to try and avoid people going either into care when they don't need to, or into hospital when they don't need to. And it could be a whole range and a whole spectrum of young people's lives. It could be when they're well and coping independently. It could be when they're starting to get some health problems, or maybe starting to begin to struggle to cope independently. We might put some more services in there. Or it could be when they're that next step up, needing regular low-level health care and care and support, or more intensive support. So people that are having intensive support either in their own homes or in another setting may also benefit from preventative services. And also those having a health or care crisis. And I think carers, I actually did a focus group yesterday with carers, and it was really, really clear there that so much around the prevention agenda, when people are caring for people long term with multiple and complex issues and quite often going to crisis, the carer side of things is really, really important. So, I mean, it's a very big document. You'll see we're proposing to fund a lot of it through the existing Section 256 monies this year, and then going on to the Better Care Fund in the future. Very much a joint collaborative effort between ourselves and the Royal Borough, and we recommend it to you to approve it today. It's going to happen on the board tomorrow.
Okay, so we have approval for the thank you. Not around. Thank you. Thanks for sticking to the time. So let's catch up a little bit. So I really wanted to then move on to a quick finance report, really, kind of on 10 if I was happy to step in and give us our up-to-date information.
Thank you,
what I try to do is I give the position as at month 10, and I give you some brief heads up as to what month 11, which is February, looks like as well, because it's now quite some time after we closed down month 10. So the overall position and the overall forecast for month 10 was positive. We showed an increase in our forecast surplus for the year, which is now being factored into our planning for 14-15, so it gets carried forward and helps manage the situation in 14-15. And that's mainly because we start the year with set reserves and contingencies, and through the course of the year we look at how many of those we need to use and how many can be released into the overall position for the CCG. What we also saw in month 10 were a number of positive variances. So think budgets which had improved compared to the forecast in the previous month. Two main areas. Firstly, in terms of acute activity, there was a reduction. So for month 10 we were using the reports from trusts for month 9, which included the Christmas period. And fairly consistently across all trusts there was lower activity than we were forecasting during December. I think the reason for that was because December, particularly the Christmas period, was quite a long, because of when Christmas fell, quite a lot of people had 2 weeks off and there was less activity going through in terms of elective activity during that 2-week period. The other area which saw a really positive improvement in month 9, and is reported in the main body of the report, was around prescribing, where we saw a significant improvement. However, no sooner had I put the pressed the send button on the report than the PPA, who are the organisation who do the forecasting for prescribing, they said, oh dear, we've made a mistake. We didn't get that forecast right, and as I've highlighted in the covering report, unfortunately the figures for month 11, when you come to see them, you'll see a £440,000 deterioration because of that change in the forecast. So overall, our position improved probably by about £100 in terms of the underlying position. But half of that has been wiped out by that change in the forecast in the PPA. In terms of acute activity, and you appreciate that I'm partway through closing down the numbers for February now. In the round, they look at about the same sort of level as we're forecasting here. So at the moment, from what I know, I'm expecting us to be at about the same sort of position as we're forecasting here, which is good. And I think, as you alluded to in the introduction, what we now need to make sure is that we need to land the numbers on the forecast here, and that will be a key focus for myself and the team in terms of how we manage our position through the year. So that's the overall position.
Thank you. Any kind of questions on the kind of pilot? Obviously, kind of, will be kind of get this as we get closer to the position of being able to have clarity. To kind of trust the numbers in to kind of get that landing on the right spot.
It's not a directly related question to the financial, it's just that I have a request to the governing body in terms of delegation and authorisation around the preparation of the accounts, which we have to have formally minuted. So I was going to ask that the governing body delegates responsibility for the preparation and submission of the draft accounts to NHS England and the external auditors to the Chief Financial Officer.
So this is obviously, we're a last governing body meeting, so this is an opportunity to say, we kind of looking towards Nigel at this stage, to no pressure there, to be able to submit that to NHS England. Is that a position that everyone's happy with, given that we've kind of understood the accounts going all the way through this year?
Why do we have to do that? Because we surely will have another meeting before the deadline for that submission.
In the Constitution, it has as a governing body responsibility, which is a little bit of, actually I would normally expect it to be something that is automatically delegated to the Chief Finance Officer, because it's a technical submission in a very tight timescale. But because that's the language in our Constitution at the moment, I need to formally ask you, please can I press the send button on the...
You'll be doing that when you'll be doing that on...
We'll be doing it in April, and we...
No,
This is the last.
This is the last
You will, of course, at a later date, get a full report on the file, and you will, in parallel with this, we're asking membership to delegate responsibility for the final submission of the audited accounts at the beginning of June to the audit committee, and then after that will be a full, final, audited, signed off set of accounts which can come back both to governing body and to memberships later in the year, and ultimately it's something which needs to go into the public domain through a public meeting before the end of September. It's just, I think, in some of the drafting around the Constitution and who does what and when, some of the practicalities and pragmatism of who actually needs to do the work in terms of, and then in relation to the individual meetings, which is something that often it becomes practically impossible. So that's why we also need to ask membership to say to the audit committee, you can sign off the final audited accounts, because that's a meeting which your external auditors are present. But that's something which the governing body can't do, it has to be membership which does that.
Given that, are we happy to delegate that?
We'll discuss as I mean,
I suggest, actually, is your concern a scrutiny concern, or you
yes,
just...
it's just to do with the scrutiny. I mean, I think I'm modelling the draft and the final, so that's why I said we discuss that. I think it's my own modelling.
This is the draft.
Yes.
And I would have thought, I'm amazed we put something in the Constitution that says the finance officer cannot talk to anything about the draft.
Yeah.
And if we have specifically done that, then it's in the bracket.
I think there's wording in the Constitution. You all have to do it. So.
Yeah, but I mean,
We can
about
have
a draft. But equally, I'm more concerned about the next bit, which actually is, as well as the audit committee, I think we presumably has to be before, even though it's the membership who needs to make that decision, we will expect to see them before they go off.
Yes.
Yes,
To the finals.
and that's the one that I was expecting we would have an opportunity to do.
We haven't got another foot. When do you have to press and submit?
I think this even I understand it's too soon, but
yes. So there isn't another meeting before that button. So that's what we need to do.
The final audited accounts need to go after, between the audit committee on the 30th of May and something like the 5th or 6th of June.
We have got another meeting when it's the draft, which is that we have to submit that we need.
And it is always draft until the external auditors have been through everything and said, yes, that is a true and fair view.
Okay. So it's the draft version that we Thank you. Wanted to then just proceed on to and kind of welcome Tim and Melody, who are our prescribing advisors, working with both WAM and and Slough. We have some policies which we are looking for approval today, and we don't need to necessarily have too much discussion. However, one of our governing body members who's not here today has put some wanted some discussion around the hepatitis B and meningococcal vaccinations. She wasn't able to attend today at the last minute, and has kind of literally just sent me an email, which I was just reminded of Diana, to ask us a question, so I can read that out. Okay. Would you want to just run through just briefly kind of the top line of kind of each of the policies and also
And thanks to Mandy for volunteering to step in, but thankfully my other meeting finished early, so I managed to attend. So brought 5 policies today for consideration, which have been drafted by the Effective Prescribing Committee and also reviewed by the Quality Committee as well prior to coming in. So the first of those is around prescribing melatonin in primary care. And essentially the key point around this is there are various products available, melatonin products available. There's one which is licensed and lots of unlicensed products. And so the view of the committee was that unless a licensed product was used, that we should essentially be prescribing melatonin. So unlicensed products should not be allowed on prescription, whereas we should always favour the licensed product essentially. And this has been put together jointly with the HFT, who obviously do a lot of initiation, particularly in children, of melatonin. So that's the first one there. Are there any particular questions around?
So you say if we need to prescribe it, that is non-licensed?
So essentially we're saying it can be prescribed, but only if it's that licensed product. If the specialist recommends an unlicensed product, which hopefully they won't, then they have to hold on to the prescriber.
I assume it would come up as a red.
It will be flagged on the system,
on.
absolutely.
We've just recently been asked to prescribe it in an adult.
It would be off-label. It would be off-label but licensed.
Okay, fine.
In children.
In children.
No, this is an adult. Okay.
So the second one is around silicone dressings for scars essentially. So again, we've worked with the tissue viability team to review the evidence around these particular dressings, for which there doesn't appear to be particularly good evidence. And so the suggestion of this policy is that these shouldn't be prescribed because there's not good evidence for benefit essentially.
Has there been any discussion with the acute trust? Because sometimes it's recommended by acute plastic surgeons, and I think the evidence. I mean, not to say that every consultant in the hospital as plastic surgeon will totally rely on evidence-based medicine all the time, but it's worth probably having some discussion about this with them prior to the implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do, that's a very good point. All of these policies will go through our local provider for consideration as well. However, we often a lot of problems we have of trusts further afield, and it's obviously difficult to communicate with every trust that may initiate these type of things. So we try to consult everything that we can, and there are exceptions to every policy as well.
But we clearly have on our private letters that nothing will be prescribed and wouldn't be prescribed on the NHS. So
it's probably the other NHS providers say
we have to treat bases of the issue first to have a discussion.
Something that's actually included in the discussion about the contract in terms of commissioning it. So someone in this case, they should know that we're commissioning it, but we're not going to support this in the community after.
Yeah, so again, there's a contracts do specify local prescribing policies and formulas have to be adhered to. Obviously, again, it's about whether we have actually a contract with some of these providers, essentially, if they're further afield.
But you at some point do agree to pay for the commissioned episode. So if you don't have a contract in advance, at the point you get approval to go, you need to make sure that the relevant policies are drawn to their attention.
That's within a big contract, is that right?
Then we have a policy around treatment of minor ailments. And so this is essentially setting out that in terms of the resources available to us for prescribing we think that there should be some responsibility on the public to read minor ailments and not expect automatically to get certain items on prescription. So
that's a really difficult one.
It is a
really difficult one, because interestingly enough, it's not usually the poor or benefits, it's often the middle class, that like Calpol or I want to prescribe, and they know that if they push you hard enough, no one will defend you. It's really difficult.
It is a challenge, and so we're trying to set out some particular conditions. So, you know, the thing, Calpol is the most common that comes up, and coughs and colds essentially, and what we're saying is that you would expect somebody to have that as a standard remedy in their home essentially.
People on benefit don't do that. But I think it's very important to have a schedule, so you can say it's policy that we don't prescribe it. But if anyone challenges that, we won't win.
And it's very difficult in practice to all the GPs doing the same thing across 20 practices. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the problems that happens obviously is patients may see 7 different people and get a different answer from each, and so the idea is to try to get a common view.
Adrian, can I just ask whether you could make it absolutely clear this applies to adults and children?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
It's very difficult for us
because they're particularly the parents knowing that prescriptions there's no charge for them. Common sense for adults who begin having prescription charge, they've already worked it out a long time. But for children, and I would have thought if you're going to expect the elderly to be following this, then the parents sadly will have to do so too. There needs to be complete consistency. I think
that's the difficulty. There isn't, so you're in a difficult place. But if it's decided that's what you do, it makes it much easier for us. So you say,
and then we have the one which I think
how do you monitor it?
So we have got prescription data which do this type of thing. I mean, it's often difficult to separate that data out, but a lot of these remedies we can tell whether they're prescribed or not, and then just ask the question of the practice and why in that particular case it was essentially. Yeah, exactly. So we don't get any patient information or anything like that. It's just to do with numbers of prescriptions done for particular items, and if there's particular variation, then it's just having that discussion with the practice around, are they aware of this, or was there a particular reason why it was actually required generally in that case?
I think I'm really sure that when challenged, or counterpoints, if we said, no, we don't prescribe that, we quite understand. If challenged, it would be really unpleasant when we lose. So no doubt about it, and if the child's need, they're on benefit, you're more than likely to stand, and that's where our difficulty is. You make a stand and you get challenged.
Yeah, and you always enter that difficult area, so if
and I guess you don't want to be dragged through any procedure, so you give it very unhappily. But it's a difficult area. You wouldn't stand up for it.
It is a different area, but
I believe in it. I totally believe in it.
I mean, that's part of the battle we face in terms of winning people over and explaining that we're trying to get the best we can out of what we have.
They're not interested.
I think, Tim started off by saying this policies which are not going to the GPs, but it's going to the patients and the public. And so there's somewhere that the conversation can be had around
I think they'll be uncomfortable with it. Because we do get challenged unpleasantly.
Does the governing body feel that the CCG is confident enough to promote the existence of policy and to actually do that public relations exercise in advance? Because if we don't, then I would suggest we shouldn't be approving this. If we do, because actually it is invidious for individuals after patient conversations to happen in the situation, and if we truly believe that this is what our policy should be, we should be prepared to promote it.
Have you had any patient engagement around the policy? Have you thought about engaging with groups of patients, maybe young mothers?
So we have a patient representative on our group, and we haven't specifically targeted particular groups, like you mentioned, in terms of parents.
It face you up.
Yeah, it's like when we move on to the next area of the discussion about some of their priorities, it's a difficult issue, isn't it? A very challenging issue.
It's very
But
easy to intellectualise about it. It's very difficult to be challenged.
I mean, I guess my question would be, do we have confidence in the process that has come to this recommendation? And the answer to that is yes. Well, in my view, it is yes, that we have a robust process. There may well be some challenge, and we will have to deal with that when it
But
comes
I think
up.
if the CCG takes a stance and we're challenged and they take it further, then that's helpful.
Yes, and that's sort of why we would have
Yeah.
this policy rather than an individual GP having to do that. So that's part of the role.
Because it's unpleasant.
Can we make a recommendation though to maybe kind of engage with kind of some focus groups around kind of just that thing? I mean, that would be worth doing because it may be, because you talk about this from a kind of patient perspective, and you want to have some of that kind of how you want to engage with influence, because you'll be supporting the GP conversation with the patients to be able to do that.
And just again going to our unintended consequences, one of the things we previously discussed at the governing body is trying to avoid unnecessary admissions or presentations of children to the emergency departments. And my child has a temperature of 39 and the GP won't give me some Calpol. It doesn't make a very good story. If we're trying to reduce an emergency attendance, which may be the consequence. So,
and then they'll go to A&E and they'll get given some.
I mean, this is we've got to tackle this from a whole variety of areas, haven't we? So this is I think the issue. We have confidence in this process. There may well be some unintended consequences, and it could well be the way to describe. But then we have to do a lot more around patient education because arguably it's inappropriate with the buy Calpol to counter work. So we've got a lot more work to do. Absolutely.
Yeah, we can promote self-care, can't we, within
Yes,
the
exactly.
CCG,
Then the next item is hepatitis B and meningococcal
travel vaccines. So there are certain vaccines which are always prescribed on the NHS. There are others that are not prescribed on the NHS, and there are these two, hepatitis B and meningococcal, which fall in between the two, where there are certain circumstances where they are prescribed on the NHS, but they can also be provided privately by practices as well. So they fall into this kind of middle area. And what's noticeable from, again, prescription data is that some practices prescribe on the NHS a lot more than other practices. So we have some variation in where the practices are providing these vaccines on the NHS or privately to their patients. And so again, the question we were mulling over was whether, again, best use of NHS resources, whether if somebody is choosing to travel, whether this should form part of the cost of their holiday essentially, rather than it being an NHS cost. Obviously, if you have there are other reasons why these vaccines can be given on the NHS in terms of at-risk groups and that type of thing, that's fine, but we're specifically talking about people that will not otherwise get them on the NHS and travel, essentially.
I think this is the point that Jackie Gummer has not wanted to make, and so I'm just reading out our concerns. She's got concerns that hepatitis B in combination with hepatitis A should be, for travel should be taken. There's some BMA guidance around that, which she's quoted, which says that travel immunisations that must not be given as part, must be given as part of NHS provision for GNS additional services. So this is what practices follow in terms of BMA policy. So we'll be going outside of some of those BMA guidelines.
Okay, so maybe it's not quite clear in the policy, but this would essentially be saying that the patient, the individual, can have their Hep A separately on the NHS, but the Hep B is a separate vaccination privately.
Right. So the Hep B isn't covered in
Because the combination is a higher cost to the NHS in the individual.
So the Hep A would be covered by the National Health Service. The Hep B wouldn't necessarily be covered in the combination vaccine.
Yeah.
So the option would be to have the hepatitis A vaccine on its own, without the hepatitis B travelling.
Or Or the combined one that you would pay for.
So is that clear that it's that that's not going against being made up?
The problem is you can't charge for the element, so therefore you could not have the combination privately.
Jackie's arguing that the vaccine in combination is a much cheaper option, providing NHS treatment with plus B related complications. Quite a few challenges. So the risk obviously of getting to plus B and then the cost of the NHS service is going to be much higher. Obviously the covering the cost of the extra cost of the vaccines for everyone. So she's in the whole system point of view, she's kind of
you can argue that against any travel which require long-term infectious disease.
It's only required for your holiday, then you should pay.
okay, so we
You just need to add in, this policy does not apply for hepatitis A as a single vaccine.
Yes.
If you just look like sentences, then, because the way it's worded actually doesn't say that, but I agree. You just write in a complete, explicit sentence.
okay. And then the last one is repeat prescription.
And the next one was just around duration for repeat prescriptions. So obviously there's been various areas have gone in 28 days as standard. So we kind of try to look at getting the balance between wasted medicines, which is a problem with longer prescriptions. You have generally more unused wasted medicines, but then also balancing that against an element of patient convenience and that type of thing in terms of having to get a prescription every month. And so,
not to mention the practice convenience.
And practice workload as well. So, having looked at that, we felt that a reasonable balance was a 28 or 56 day duration, taking into account the stability of the patient and the patient in question would be a reasonable balance.
I think it's really helpful for practices to have that as clearly
Some people
articulated.
challenge you wanting 3 months before.
Or 6 months or a year. It's very difficult sometimes to have a conversation, but this gives you some good guidance to be able to have that conversation. Practices as well.
And I think it is down to actually educating the practices on how best to use the kind of systems you've got, because there is functionality within, for example, in this web to do automatic dispensing, which means the patient's not getting it all in one hit, but they're getting it monthly, and then if there is a need to change or the patient doesn't need it anymore, the pharmacy will update, change, and will cancel the script. And I think there's a lack of awareness generally about how we can help.
Thank you. So can we just take the approval of those 5 items?
I'm still not quite clear where we are.
Over the council, you mean the medicines for minor ailments? Are we going to take that one out for more work? Is that the recommendation for everybody, or do we want to include that in some caveats?
Some information with regards to how it's going to be communicated to patients, so that actually when we are challenged, we can immediately refer to and provide them the information that they have access to.
So can we recommend the 4 other policies and then ask for that one to come back at some stage with a little bit more work on it?
So these are communication strategies.
I was going to say, surely what we're saying is we approve, subject to you approving a communication strategy. We don't want to see it.
I think it's right.
We just need to ensure that the self-care is
the self-care bit and how we promote that. Obviously, the rights is the Thank you. Thanks for all your hard work in describing committee. Next item, on a similar vein, we've got some policy statements with regard to the Thames Valley Priorities Committee, which Christina is going to just take us very quickly through.
I'll just repeat
Not a lot of detail.
There's lots of people actually at this meeting who are part of the Thames Valley Priorities Committee, not least Tim, Alan, Ali, myself. So there are 5 policy statements on gender dysphoria, varicose veins, hysterectomy, breast vein occlusion and anal irrigation. We also want you to give approval to the Thames Valley Ethical Framework. So just to quickly describe the ethical framework and why it's been brought here. It's for any decisions to be made on the priorities committee, we need to take account of the ethical framework in which we work, and it's legally approved as well. So on the priorities committee, we do have Professor Chris Newdick, who is Professor of Law at Reading University, and Dr. Mark Sheenan, who is, again, Doctor of Ethics at Oxford University. He teaches undergraduate and postgraduate medical students in ethics. So it's all being approved by them to make sure that it is as compliant with legal provisions and the public sector quality duty, NHS constitution and so forth. And it's built around those 8 principles. I won't necessarily go through them, but I'm happy to do so if you wanted to. So I'm hoping that you approve this because we need a framework in which decisions are made, and we go through all of those 8 principles when decisions are made to make sure that the policy stands up against them. So I'm hoping that's okay. So I'll just quickly say 1 or 2 lines about each of those policies. You can ask me questions, and if I don't know the answer, I will ask the clinical effectiveness team to pull this together. So the first one is around gender dysphoria. There was originally a policy in place within the PCT, but unfortunately that got pulled. And the reason why it got pulled and archived was that NHS England Specialised Commissioning took over what is the core requirements for gender dysphoria. So that is, you'll notice in the policy there's a list of core aspects of gender surgery that's undertaken and paid for by NHS England. And then there's a whole list of other types of surgery or treatment that can be done, but it's CCG, so it's non-core. That will be things like breast augmentation, feminisation procedures, like the Adam's apple, all of those things that fall to CCGs. And the recommendation there is to use, we've already got a plastic surgery policy in place, and that the CCGs will allow patients to actually make an application through the IFR process using that policy with those what we would call non-core items. It's not saying that they're not allowed, there just is a process for those. And there has been some communication with NHS England's Specialised Commissioning team through Matthew Tate as well around making sure we get that very clear around what is core and what is not core, including the medication issues, which is ongoing hormonal therapy, which isn't quite so clear. So just to say that's the policy we have in place. The next one is varicose veins. And this is taking account, there's new nice guidance coming, I think it's called CG 168, that's come into place, and looks at a bigger cohort of patients who might get varicose veins, and in terms of symptomatic varicose veins as well. So they're asking for a larger cohort of patients to be taken into consideration for the sequential treatment of varicose veins, which is started out in the policy. So what the clinical effectiveness team was looked at local data, and they couldn't find sufficient local data to support that position. We did have a specialist come to the meeting who is a vascular physician. He said what he really supported, contrary to what Nice Guidance said, was around compression hosiery, and the fact that we should recommend at least a period of 6 months. That is in the policy, but not this larger cohort of patients who would be referred and treated. That's the difference. So those are patients who could, so if you look at the policy, it says it recommends, NICE recommends referral treatment of a large group of patients with varicose veins than Thames Valley currently commission on the basis of avoiding venous leg ulcers, and including those with symptomatic varicose veins. And what the priorities committee looked at, there's no reliable evidence where patients may be at more risk of developing CST, so we will include that within the policy. They've already got a list of those conditions. So if you look at the policy, it's listed in 5 areas. Does everyone understand that? Don't mind going through it. Who would comply with referral and treatment. And they wouldn't necessarily go along with what NICE said is a sequential. So it says a sequential order of treatment. I won't go through it all. because what they find in local data is that most procedures performed are a combination of those techniques, so they wouldn't include that in the policy statement. I hope that's clear. The next one is around, would you like, yes, and do you want to ask some questions? Because I know it's not clear, I'll just go into it.
There's just the two bits to the nice guidance as I understand it. One is it's reducing the threshold to have anything at all. I mean, there's a bigger pool of people who should be considered, which seems to have just got dismissed in the process of deciding that actually specific treatment should go in a certain order, and because we've got no evidence locally that that's what works. We've forgotten to go back to the should you actually be having a slightly lower threshold for treatment in the first place.
Well, we did have a specialist come, we invited 2 vascular surgeons, only one came to the meeting. But we put that to him about creating this bigger pool, which, as I said, was considered, and he didn't necessarily support that. He supported the policy recommendation we had in place already.
Several times in your brief presentation you stressed the lack of local evidence that the sequential treatment is beneficial. But that doesn't go back to the evidence behind the nice guidance about actually reducing the threshold in the first place, because actually long term the disease progresses rather than sequence. So far be it for me to suggest you go back and your experts look again, but I just question whether they quite asked the right questions.
I
think we did. I think there was.
That's fine. Maybe it's just not
so
articulated.
it might be that it hasn't been clearly articulated. But there was discussion around the threshold, and there was discussion around the sequential or not treatment.
And so just to describe what happens in priorities, they look at national data, obviously according to the NICE says, Royal College Guidance, Vascular Society, and they look at whatever local data they've got and ask local clinicians to come forward and to present the case. So there's always somebody who will know that, there'll be a vascular system there for something around continence, will be the continence, and there's it's tissue viability. There's always a specialist there. So it's not that we don't take that into consideration, and we listen to their advice. But I can, if you've got more questions, I can take that back to the team.
I'll save my comment for later if you could please more correct.
The next one was hysterectomy, and that was recommended that we continue with hysterectomy, but we take into consideration some procedures around that, around making sure that the person is being appropriately counselled, really looking at when they request it, is it a time of stress or a time of any particular trauma in their life, for example, if they're pregnant at the time and then they request it. So there's a whole list down that's within the policy about the guidelines given before you undertake hysterectomy, and to make sure that the person knows that the hysterectomy that is provided by the NHS is under a local anaesthetic, not a general anaesthetic. That's not recommended. So that one's recommended. And the next one, which is rectal vein occlusion, that was recommended the use of if I can say the actual name of the drug, intravitreal dexamethasone implant, and recommends the use of ranitidine. I think you'll know that.
Ranitidine.
Yeah. Therapy for treating vision impairment by macular edema. So there's a recommendation to do that. And the last one was anal irrigation, and we recommend it as a useful aid. That's when conservative treatment's already been exhausted. We've already gone through diet, lifestyle, all those things. But it has to be with specialist bowel management service and support. So with the appropriate nursing therapy support, not just given referral, yes, go ahead and do it. You need it within the context of the service and a pathway. That was recommended. So, and just to explain, nothing is off the list that you can't have any of these procedures. There's always an IFR. There is no no's. It's just about using the policy statement, so you can always tie through that process.
So I'm looking for approval from the governing body to for these policies, and obviously then, as Celia said, there is always the IFR process, which is about going outside of these policies. We have the governing body approval process. Getting nods. so far. Yes.
I'm just intrigued by the local expertise being given than the nice expertise.
I don't think it was not better, I think it was different. So they were different. And as
well,
always happens.
We can make a decision that in the great scheme of things we can't deliver all of nice guidance. But to actually just say that we think our interpretation is right and NICE's interpretation of the evidence is...
we can have a discussion.
Yeah.
There's probably more to it.
Do I have building approval? Yes. Thank you, Steve. We've just got the assurance framework just on this last section. We just wanted to do that just before. I think then we'll have a quick time to open up some questions to the public, and also we've got our photographer here who's going to be taking some pictures of the governing body, and with permission from the public, maybe taking some pictures of people who ask questions. But Colby is going to coordinate that part of the meeting. So, but just before we do that, we're going to just do the assurance framework, if that's possible, to be able to kind of finish off this section. So the assurance framework is...
Do you want me to do it? Yeah. So I'll put it together.
Okay.
So just as a summary, I'll just choose a summary to quite quickly say that. So as you know, the assurance framework is made up of risks that come out of the WAM CCG risk register, quality risk register strategy, and equip. And the key risks for WAM CCG are around the quality risks. I know that we've spoken about them at length, and unfortunately Sarah's hitting quite a lot of those very extreme risks that show as red are around the quality elements, including the heavy suite, and order wets and carp, and so forth. We did do an awful lot of work last time around closing risks and with reshaping them as well. And there is just some notes there around NHS 111, closing risks around adjustments in CCG budgets. And we changed, do you remember we talked about re-articulating the risks around long-term conditions, A&E, 18 needs, and procedures of limited clinical value. So Ange undertook that and rephrased those. So in summary, it left you with 6 amber high-rated risks. It's a lot less red risks now. There's 3, and those are all around poverty, I'm afraid. And 1 light amber medium-rated risk, and 2 green low-rated risks. There's also a recommendation: can we close the risks around shaping the future? Because we've been through the judicial review, and we've also been through the process around independent evaluation, and those are all closed down. We've had some very good feedback and work around community partnership, more and working with local councillors. And those 2 risks that have appeared on there, G09 and G08, they are around shaping the future. One around reputation and working, the other one around the actual risks around the IRP, the configuration plan, and judicial review. There's a recommendation to close those. Any other questions, please ask me.
We are still expecting Sarah. I think she was going to be trying to put an meeting over at 4:30, so we will be able to get some more detail about the risks around Evernote and the Henley suite. So hopefully we'll be able to take some of those questions whether she comes in the next 10 minutes or so. Okay, so can we just accept that? And also the point that Christine was making about taking the risks around this shaping the future of the insurance rating. So we're happy about doing that.
And just so we're doing a deep dive on this, we do really review this at the audit committee. It's on the agenda for Friday, along with the WAM CCG risk register. So we go through it in a lot more detail anyway, so there is a process.
Thank you. We'll get the audit committee kind of minutes of next week. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for the assurance framework. Good. So just at this point, then it would be we haven't had any pre-prepared questions that I know of, to the governing body around the agenda, but we have got some space for kind of 10 minutes to for the members of the public to ask any questions. As I say, we're going to have the photographer who's going to take the pictures during that. If you don't want to have your picture taken, then we just tell Corby.
If you raise your hand, and then I can know to take a picture. But if you don't mind having a picture taken, then you just fill in a consent form. So if you don't want a picture, raise your hand.
So anyone who doesn't want
picture, let me know anyway, so we can just take your details down.
Anyone who doesn't want a picture now, raise their hands. We've got to have something for the end. Yeah, but no. We've got it clear, okay, and then we'll sign consents as we come out. Okay. So, can we have any questions from the members of the public? Is that, is anyone looking to answer? Would you just kind of say who you are and then ask a question?
No, I haven't any questions really. My name is Brenda Evans and I went to several of the meetings regarding, I'd rather not take my picture.
All right, okay, that's fair enough.
I came to various meetings about the closure of Heatherwood Hospital, which I've been quite concerned about because I'm older and I saw the beginning of the National Health Service, what was going on before the National Health Service, and I've been very interested, and I do like a small cottage hospital where you get individual treatment. I've been concerned only with what you're talking about, care of the elderly. I'm older myself, but I've seen instances of where people that I've known have gone to live away with perhaps their spouse, they've lost their spouse, they've made various friends that have been very good to them, but gradually one and another of them have gone and they're left in one area on their own. They get care. I think I've got one friend that lives in Bottle Tracy in Devon, and she spent 18,500 trying to get round her capital to be within an amount that is acceptable, you know, to have help. She spent all this, and now they've assessed her, and she's getting £450. And I believe, now I'm not quite sure of the amounts, but she gets help in the morning when she gets up for breakfast, and they leave something for her to have at lunchtime, and someone comes in at 7:30 and puts her to bed. Well, she hasn't, gradually all the friends that have been seeing her, they've either gone to live near their other friend or parted. And although she's having care and she's in her own home, it's not really living, is it? Do you understand? And so I'm interested in anything to do with care and how you look after them. If you've got I myself have sons and daughters. I haven't got any problem at the moment, and I don't think I would have. But I do see other people that are in this lonely place, or not particularly away, but on their own, with nobody that really cares for them, you know, and they're there for hours and hours sitting alone waiting for someone to come and put them to bed. Anyway, so forgive me, but that's my interest, okay?
Thank you. So that's if I can sum up, there are two questions there. Really, kind of one is around kind of the future of Heatherwood Hospital, which we can maybe ask Alan to just articulate a very brief answer around where we are with that and the possible changes that might be made to Heatherwood Hospital. Definitely not going in terms of we talked about loss, but I think it's enhancement of it's one of the things we talk about. And the second bit, which is very relevant to our agenda today, which is around the health and social care and how we're going to come together. And that has been brought out. Maybe Shona, would you be able to answer the question around how we can bring that together in the future?
So absolutely understand your concerns around the future of Heatherwood, and that's been a big topic of debate, as you probably know locally. So where we are at the moment with that, we're working with Frimley Park around the...
Yes, I understand that, but actually I've just been looking after my own daughter that's ill in hospital, but had been in Salisbury, and I came back last night and I had a message from a friend that lives in Slough saying that you were meeting today, so I came back at 9 o'clock last night and I thought, well, I'll go and see what the governors of Heatherwood had to say, so that's why I'm here. Okay?
That's very impressive, we're glad to have you along, that's good. I mean, in terms of the reassurance around the future of Heatherwood Hospital, we're working with the provider as to how we might redesign this to make it a fit-for-purpose site that we can deliver the appropriate care for people. So there's a lot of work ongoing. As Adrian said, there's no idea around closing it at the moment, it's just around how we can make the best use of this.
I see. Well, and myself, I had a treatment on my foot in Heatherwood last April, and I was more than satisfied with everything that I got from the staff and everything. And I don't mind going into an old place. Everybody wants to knock down old places and build new. I'm one for renovating, but I was brought up in the age when you have to do that all the time. Okay? Sorry.
Okay. And I think the issue around kind of whether the buildings are at a stage, and this winter time, Heatherwood especially,
yes.
has had some real problems with the structure of buildings, which have which have meant the patient care was affected, and so really it's future-proofing that in, as you say, either a new building and a new structure or renovating. Sometimes the new building is actually a better way to go, and I think that would be up to the provider, which is Herald Epsom and possibly new provider.
But I have heard talk that even if the old building is knocked down, whatever you get for selling or whatnot, the old hospital, you won't get enough to build a new one. You need topping up.
Yes, there will be some financial.
Yes.
And it is around ensuring the quality of care. We can't always offer high quality services in some.
No. Anyway, thank you for listening to me. But that's why I'm here.
I'm going to, yes, about the social care thing. I mean, I share, some of the issues we talked about, because loneliness for older people is one of the major issues around mental health and depression in older people, and trying to engage with them, remaining in their home. And one of the things that we know that people have asked for is they don't want to be placed in a home, they want to remain in their own home.
Yes.
Even if they don't see people, they want to be surrounded by their own belongings and not move from the home where they've been brought up.
Yes.
And one of the dilemmas around that is how you provide the care arrangements. But there are a number of projects in place in order for them to make choices about how to provide their own care. So you don't have to have home carers coming into you. You can have that money and you can choose how you provide that care. And there are lots of examples where people have taken that money and got friends or neighbours to provide some of the care and paid them to be able to do some of that. So they've got a much more personalised approach to having that care. But there are issues in many ways around communities, around luncheon clubs and community resources, which the social service department where your friend is living should be looking towards, which is what we're trying to do as part of the plan. So that it isn't just about home care, it is about having those other contacts with people that keep you stimulated. We have a fantastic scheme called Care Bank in the Maidenhead of volunteers that do exactly what you said, where people are housebound, where they can go in and befriend the person, even if it's a couple of hours a week. And that's run by the Royal Volunteer Service in conjunction with the local authority, and we're up to about 400 volunteers now. We're aiming to have 500, which is keeping people at home and keeping them stimulated and interested in having some contact with the outside world.
Actually, fortunately for me, the people that I'm talking about haven't had dementia, so that hasn't, nothing happened. These are just people that are just left and gradually lost all their connections,
And the dilemma is we come across a lot of people where that has happened, but they still don't want us to move them. See that it's about trying to find that balance about choice and keeping and it's people like you who keep your friends going and kind of giving them the information to kind of ask locally what's available.
Thank you.
Well, I've come here really, care of the elderly is something I'm interested in, and it's the transition between hospital to home and the communication, the time it takes, and the worry. I have a 91-year-old friend who was in St Mark's and trying to, because she was self-funding, she was told she had to do it on her own, and that threw her into an absolute panic. She didn't. And so she had a week. She's still not able to stand. I mean, she's gone to her own home, but she's not somebody that can go out to day centres because she's very unstable on her feet. And I think she went through a very worrying time as to how she was going to set this up herself when coming out of hospital in a frail state, and she was told she'd got a week to find carers. So I think that's a bit right.
So that's yes.
I've noticed that one. I mean, if you, I'm sure Douglas, I'm the head of adult social care for Borough, if you would like to give me any details, I would be very happy to follow up that instance, because irrespective of whether somebody funds their own care or the council funds their care, she should have had some advice and guidance from some of our social care professionals who are in the hospital working with people on discharge. So if you let me have the details afterwards, I will find out.
It may be misunderstanding, but I do.
But she should not be left on her own. She should be given advice and guidance.
Yes, she was, I think, frightened and worried by it.
And she shouldn't be that. We should, because even irrespective of how you fund your care, adult social care still have a responsibility to assess people's needs and to provide them with the information, advice and support to do that. And in some instances, we will arrange the package and we will arrange that payment through us. But if you'd like to do, I mean, I'm very happy
I know
to
that's happened
investigate
with other
it.
cases, I know, but it's mostly been people who don't have funding. But I think it's the problem, the transition between the sub-funding to the yes. Well, I
but if I don't know, please tell us about it or send a letter in, because I can then engage them to look into that. Because we try to get it right. Sometimes it doesn't. Unless I know, we can't put it right if it's a consistent issue. So really, do give us the details and I'll follow up for you.
Any other questions? Thank you. That's some really good questions from the floor. I wanted to give Sarah 5 minutes to get herself ready. While Sarah's doing that, we'll just go through the committee minutes from I just ask everybody's members to look through the committee minutes, the equipment performance, the quality, strategy, planning and transition minutes, the audit committee minutes. You should have had sight of these on board pad in the last week or so. Were there any kind of questions that kind of jumped out to people, or anything that you wanted to bring up from any of those minutes? Really just for information. No? So we can accept the people that read those and understood and been happy with them. That's great. So that gives kind of the chance then to kind of go on to Sarah. So thank you for kind of dashing down from Oxford and kind of sparing the time to kind of just present the quality part of the agenda. We have discussed in terms of the assurance framework some of the issues which have been on the assurance framework. But specifically, we value your update on Heather Wexham and Henry Street and kind of what's been happening there, and in the context of the quality scorecard as well.
Thank you very much. In the context of quality scorecard, not much has changed since last month, because obviously we've had 2 public governing body meetings in a very short space of time. We talked last month about stroke performance, and we've talked to the Trust about producing an additional action plan, and I think we are planning to issue a contract quality notice subject to approval by the Quality Committee. So I think we've had a long time of sort of explanations, and we're really going to push that forward from a action point.
Can you just explain what
a contract quality notice is a notice we can issue under the contract, and it means that they have to produce an action plan within 5 days, which we then monitor. It's a more formal version of what we're currently doing. In relation to the wider Heatherwood and Wexham Park issues that we've experienced over the past year, CQC came in again mid-February, I think the 11th for 3 days, to do an inspection under the planned inspection regime. Whilst there's been very limited feedback from the inspection, there was obvious improvements that could be seen around the organisation. We're expecting a report between 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks after the inspection, so that was the middle of February. So the earliest I would expect it is the end of March. The new regime means that there will be a quality summit in the middle of April that we have been invited to attend, where CQC feedback on their inspection. We're continuing to monitor the previous action plans from the CQC inspection in an oversight group that includes regulators like Monitor and the area team. With regards to Henley Suite, we've been working with them very, very closely, doing weekly monitoring, and have had a phased return to accepting patients. We've had a really positive response from Bupa, and they're now compliant with their CQC outcomes, and they've followed the action plan very carefully. We've monitored them in detail, and I'm confident in the care that they're providing currently.
Any discussion around any of those points? Just in terms of the Henley Suite, so just in terms of practice and the models of practice and how they are kind of supporting the Henley Suite continuing improvements. And there's some things around medication which obviously really well with that. So my question is how mentioned in practice now the provision of the content to sort of through the problems around medication which are there.
So I've met with the practice on a number of occasions.
Yes, and our warfarin monitoring is one of the issues.
So we've met with the practice on a number of occasions, and we're now meeting the practice with the Henley Suite, because obviously one of the things we're trying to do is ensure that it's run as a service rather than three separate providers inputting into it, because that was one of the reasons why the quality issues developed. There was no accountability for the service as a whole, and that's been really successful, and we need to continue to build on that. We've had some great support from Tim's team in monitoring medications and helping to do that improvement, and all the medication areas have been sort of looked at through the serious concerns framework with the local authority. So I think we are very confident.
I think we have made remarkable progress, and yes, we are confident. And now it's about the sustainability, isn't it?
Which is why we haven't dropped them from enhanced monitoring.
So how will enhanced monitoring?
They're only currently having 12 patients. They need to get back up to their 20 patients, and we would need to be confident that they were, no concerns were raised before we would drop them from enhanced monitoring. I can't see them being dropped from it till about June.
So will we have a report before?
We can provide updates. I think it's on the risk register, and the risk register is regularly updated.
And people are working very positively with us all, not they, to sustain that.
Can I just ask that, I think it came up at OLT last time, that practices of the patients that are on the ward are included in this ongoing review, because obviously they may have something to highlight to you, and they're still responsible for the patient because they're on our list.
I think we probably need to take it outside of here about how practices would feed that information in, because that should be happening anyway.
And I think it was a concern that we don't know if our patients are on the wards, that we wouldn't know to bring it to, or a method to bring it to.
We probably need to take that outside that detail, outside of this meeting.
Thank you. So, is everyone clear around kind of how, in terms of the human rights and kind of quality issues, the new kind of CQC inspection, which is just in case we obviously have, but it's looking like there's some improvements which I can see. Obviously, there is quite a way to go. I think that's the message that I would give, that some of these improvements are going to take some time, and that's what the trust is saying. But we're glad that at least CQC has seen some of those improvements, and we'll wait for
I think we need to be careful and not say that we think CQC has seen the improvements.
Well, we don't know.
Clarity.
We won't know.
We'd like to hope they have.
We hope they have. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So we take that as information. Finally, kind of any other business?
We're going to have the locally enhanced services back. We're still the work is doing.
Haven't had haven't seen seen anything back from him yet. Yes. But I think it won't come back to this. Well, I think it was too late to come back to this meeting here.
But I think that was the intention, because he said he'd bring it this morning.
I haven't had a... We didn't get that.
Also, he's not going to do anything.
No, someone will bring it back. Yeah. I think I'm not sure whether that work's been done, because David was away.
He was away last
week, so there wasn't
a few. I think that the last meeting we agreed that the letter would go out to all practices saying we would roll the service over for 6 months and there was some more work needed to happen.
The minutes did say
The
minutes do say, yeah, I'm sure it was coming back soon.
Okay, we'll pick that up. Yes, we should have sorted that out.
Thank you. Good. Thank you for your attention. And we have got a kind of a part 2 to the agenda. Just wanted to thank the public for their attendance. We're going to try and clear out the camera and everything from the room, and then we'll go into the second half. If people can sign consent forms.
Just to ask, is it possible to take a picture of the governing body, just a nice quiet spot outside here? So it might be a chance to stretch your legs, so it's really nice, the sun's out, so
we'll have
just 2 minutes if possible.
Group shot. If everybody's going to have a stretch, we'll do 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
I'll take a leave.
That'd be great. Okay. Till this goes in.
Originally,